do anything at this point?
Welcome all to this EcoAction Climate webinar. It is my pleasure to introduce to you EcoAction Committee Co-Chair Mark Dunley.
Thank you, Michael. And I want to welcome everybody to the Climate Action webinar and also in observance of Indigenous Peoples Day. I will mention that right now we are seeing, so slideshow, hide slide from the beginning. Okay, I will note that right now we are seeing people in DC and the People versus Fossil Fuels, which I know the Indigenous Environmental Network is quite active with, and one of the lead sponsors, along with the Build Back Fossil Free campaign, which the EcoAction is committed. October is going to be a very critical month, both in the United States and worldwide. Both with the COP26 gathering in Glasgow and the ongoing fight to try to get Congress and the Democrats to come to agreement as to what type of green economic stimulus they are going to provide. We're going to talk about COP26, the World Climate Meeting, which is taking place from November 1st to 12th in Glasgow, including the Worldwide Day of Action on Saturday, November 6th. But first, we'll have some presentations on the right of nature, which is a platform proposal made by EcoAction to the National Green Party. And our first speaker will be Lizzie Adams, presenting on the rights of nature from EcoAction. She'll be followed by Tom Goldtooth, who's with the Indigenous Environmental Network, and I'll go back and introduce each of the speakers as we get to them. Howie Hawkins, who is the 2020 Green Party presidential nominee, will talk about the eco-socialist Green New Deal. I will come back and talk about COP26, and Faith Longo, also known as Sunali Husilaua, and I didn't quite get that right. And she is a Cherokee Sacred Pipe Carrier and a member of Green Party Indigenous Caucus, which is in formation. And Faith, besides presenting a bit, will also provide us with a closing ceremony. And then we will open it up to questions and answers, and hopefully be finished a little bit after 9. But at this point, I want to turn it over to Lizzie Adams, who is going to talk about the rights of nature from EcoAction. And thank you all for joining. And we will have time for questions and answers later.
Greetings. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Great. This is Lizzie from the EcoAction Committee, speaking from the lands of the Timucua Territory in Florida, a state that horrifically celebrates Columbus Day, despite our Green Party of Florida legislative efforts to remove colonizer and Confederate state legal holidays. So if we could, friends, please take a moment to acknowledge the ancestral lands that you are coming from in the chat or comments. Greens recognize the destruction of settler colonialism and ask all participating this evening to pause and honor the elders and Indigenous peoples, relatives past, present, and future who, despite genocide and oppression, continue on as some of the wisest among us, carrying traditional ecological knowledge and sustainable Indigenous ways of being. Greens are committed to standing against colonialism, racism, and patriarchy. We have been standing in solidarity here with our Miccosukee and Seminole Florida tribes in their defense of their rights to lands such as those in Big Cypress and the Everglades from assumption by the state from the federal trust. Greens understand, and research has found, that Indigenous peoples who comprise 4 to 5% of the world's population actually protect 80% of the world's biodiversity. With more than 1 million plant and animal species worldwide facing extinction, according to a recent United Nations report, rematriation, land back, and Indigenous managed lands are critical on Turtle Island across the whole globe for the ecological survival of life as we have known it. And I am trying to move my my slide here. There we go. To this end, the EcoAction Committee has proposed a Rights of Nature addition to the Green Party National Platform. What is rights of nature? One definition states the recognition of legally enforceable rights of nature, ecosystems, and species. Rights of nature comes from Indigenous wisdom. It is traceable to Indigenous understanding of nature as not property, therefore not owned. Nature is a living being to many First Nations, a relative. What we have in the US is regulatory failure. Permitting pollution is a useful tool for corporate destruction of our environment. There is a better way. Greens uphold that every US resident, indeed all beings, have a right to clean water and a healthy environment. And these are our arguments for our proposal. The mission of the EcoAction Committee is to protect and promote ecological wisdom and sustainability. Rights of Nature embraces an Indigenous philosophy of interdependent relations, an ecological wisdom needed more than ever in this heightened time of humankind's delusion of our separation from nature. And we do have a Rights of Nature provision in our platform already an international one. It is time that we had a domestic policy. So this is our proposal. We support the adoption of local, state, and federal laws which recognize the legal rights of natural communities and ecosystems, including wetlands, streams, rivers, aquifers, and other water systems to exist, flourish, regenerate, naturally evolve, and be restored. We support the inclusion in those laws of the ability of people and community to file legal actions in the name of affected natural community or ecosystem, and for courts to require restoration of the natural community or ecosystem back to its pre-damage state. So I'd like you to take a moment, and it's not necessarily a concept that most have heard about before, but this is a new jurisprudence theory and also Indigenous wisdom. And so I would like to thank you from the EcoAction Committee for consideration of this proposal, and to introduce to you Tom Goldtooth, a Diné Dakota, internationally renowned Native American climate and economic justice leader for the last nearly 4 decades. Tom is the executive director of the Indigenous Environmental Network, co-founder of the Global Alliance for the Rights of Nature, co-producer of the award-winning documentary Drumbeat for Mother Earth, and president of the 4th Rights of Nature Tribunal in Bonn, Germany, and so much more. Welcome, Tom.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Lizzie, and thank you for all the folks that put this together. And I'm really humbled to be asked to be a speaker. Geez, where do I start on this topic? First of all, I commend, the proposal to the Green Party that you're affiliated with to adopt the principles, or what we call the Universal Declaration on the Rights of Mother Earth. I have a PowerPoint, but I just wanted to start and share some symbols here. Bear along with me here. Can you see that?
Yes.
Yeah. Let's see. Nope, I wanted to go. There we go. Well, Hamidakiapi, in our Dakota language, that means how are my relations. And I think I want to start out to give some concepts to that word, relations, because that's the way that I want to share just a brief perspectives that I've been working on, and in consultation with a whole realm of spiritual leadership, elders, and youth as well, women's societies. And, I've been working on environmental justice issues, environmental racism issues since 1990. I've been a tribal manager of a tribal environmental program back in those years, on implementing regulatory, strategies, legal strategies. We have many tools in our toolbox as the Indigenous Environmental Network. And I became the director of IEN in 1996 after being involved for a number of years in the formation of a network of really grassroots folks in this country, including Canada and Alaska, that came together to put a halt to this movement of extractive development, mining, and oil and gas extraction, combustion of fossil fuels, toxic chemicals, deforestation, a lot of these issues that traditional families and societies came together and said, hey, we need to put our spirits together, our minds together, our heart, and we need to provide some kind of solution to turn this around. Like I said, I also came into IEN working for a tribal government in developing an environmental protection program. So I'm very familiar with that. And we've had many successes throughout the decades, but also many challenges. And I know I have less than 10 minutes to speak, and I wanted to talk about this movement of rights of nature, or what we call respect and responsibility in our relationship with that sacredness of Unchimaka, our grandmother Earth. But it's hard to separate Unchimaka from the sky, so many of my terminology, we call our movement to look towards the territorial integrity of Mother Earth, but also Father Sky in our work. And that's part of the creative principles that we have as part of the natural laws. And it's hard to talk about this without going into our spirituality. And one of the slides I speak from is looking at the heavens, looking at the skies and the Milky Way. We're in that area here. I have been in the global south as well, and with relatives from South Africa, like the Khoisan people. And we talk about these concepts as well, about our relationship not only to each other, but our relationship to the sacredness of Mother Earth and Father Sky. And it's very important that when I talk about these things, that I put some of that perspective together. And so in this work that I do, I want to talk a little bit about working for environmental and economic justice is spiritual work. And it reaffirms our relationship as two-legged people, as human beings, and our responsibility and duties that's been passed on to us in what we call the original instructions on how to walk on Mother Earth, how to walk on our grandmother, and that relationship with the air that we breathe, with the heavens, with the skies. And so just a really, really brief overview of what is that Indigenous worldview of that relationship with nature, with that relationship with Mother Earth. And I cannot speak to this without also lifting up the differences in cosmology. So when the settlers first came to our shores, the European folks, when they came into our lands, and they brought with them a different cosmology, so different from ours that we really couldn't comprehend them, and they couldn't comprehend us. The most destructive value that settlers imposed is the quantification and the objectification of the natural world by imposing a monetary value on sacred things and committing, of course, I'm not going to go into the depth of that, but committing genocide against the indigenous peoples who resisted. So the assumption that arose was that any land is there for the taking, and all they have to do is put up a fence around it to own it. So that authority of colonization, which is based on an idea of racist superiority, allows all things indigenous to be fair game for the taking. And that in the history of colonization, it tells that. Even the resistance that we have in Washington, D.C. right now to lift up the issues around the continuation of the subsidizing of a fossil fuel economy. And we have to look, why is it that our frontline communities and the allies have to come to DC to try to amplify that voice, that this is an environmental justice issue, the violation of our treaty rights And that was exemplified just within the past year here in northern Minnesota with the Enbridge Line 3, where our tribes were lifting up their treaty rights, which is the highest level of law that was established between our sovereign tribal nations, the Anishinaabe here, and the U.S. government, but there was no recognition of that treaty and the responsibility of the U.S. government. So this entrenchment and this ideology of racial superiority and entitlement that is that we have to deal with is real. So as we look at the intelligence of a seventh generation concept, meaning that every decision that we make is with that consciousness of how that decision will impact our world, the people, seventh generation, our future generation, is completely absent from this country's National Environmental Policy Act. It's absent from the Army Corps of Engineers, where we demanded, standing with the Standing Rock Hunkpapa Lakota people when they resisted the Dakota Access Pipeline to go across not only the river, but across the lands where there was no proper and full documentation and assessment of cultural impacts in sacred areas. So we know what this history is, and you know, that brings in dominating societies, concepts of dominion. So as part of this indigenous worldview that I have to talk about, that is embedded within the intelligence of the creator, the great spirit, the great mystery, and that every particle that there is, from the atoms to that form of the little spectrums of energy, that we're part of that integrated whole. We're not foreign from that. So that's something that's really carved in my teachings. And I have to address the issues of no part has dominion over another part. We were not put here to be stewards of anything. Rather, we were all created to live in harmony, to be fully conscious and awake, loving, with that intelligent relationship with all aspects of creation. Even in my Dakota side, Mitakie Owase means all my relations. And that's the power of the good mind. The good mind is the concept of the cosmology of the Iroquois nations, some friends of mine out east. So in this view of the relationship with the Mother Earth and the nature of Mother Earth, is what is that concept that we're born with, or that we have to strive to understand as humanity, to understand that true mother concept, that Mother Earth gives birth to us and maintains our life through her. And she's the mother of all things. So when I talk to people about, when they ask, what is your solution, Tom Goldtooth, on this dilemma of this world losing a lot of its biodiversity and resources and continues to mine to the end of the earth? How do we change this around? How do we address the climate crisis? And I always say the root of this is that humanity has to really evaluate what its relationship is to that sacredness of Mother Earth, but deeper than that, the relationship to the female creative principle of Mother Earth, and also with the water of life as well. And part of the movement, as we see, for people that are starting to embrace the rights of nature, the rights of Mother Earth, is recognizing the intelligence, the consciousness, the personality of our rivers of life.
Excuse me, Tom.
Yeah.
I just wanted to give you a little time check.
Okay.
A couple of minutes left. Sorry to interrupt.
No, that's fine.
Thank
So
you.
the interdependence of humans and nature is primary. And that goes into the structures legally that we're dealing with is legal systems that give rights to property, rights over the vital natural cycles of life. And that's someone mentioned at the beginning, Earth jurisprudence. So how do we embrace a new paradigm that is being led by Indigenous peoples? Is that how do we have a system that challenges a legal paradigm over property rights? And even some of the false solutions with climate change right now is pushing carbon trading, carbon tax, carbon offsets, and people don't know that that involves bringing carbon and methane, greenhouse gases, into a market system. And before you can treat carbon as a commodity, you got to determine whose property right that is. So how we place a monetary price on nature is very, very critical on how it creates new derivative markets that only increase the inequity and increase the destruction of Mother Earth. So as IEN, we are opposed to these systems that give more credence to the corporations. They have more rights than our people. They have more rights than the earth does to protect itself. So with that, Earth jurisprudence recognizes the concept that we only have one Mother Earth, and we must stand together in solidarity to protect her. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tom. Our next speaker is Howie Hawkins. Howie's going to talk. Howie was the 2020 Green Party presidential candidate. He's also well known as being the first candidate in the United States back in 2010 to call for a Green New Deal, particularly eco-socialist Green New Deal, in his 2010 race for governor. And he's going to talk about that and also about the Biden climate inaction. So Howie.
Well, thank you, Mark. And I'm going to start off with bad news, but I'll try to conclude with some optimism. We're in a climate emergency, and we have to face the fact that there is no emergency climate program on the table in the infrastructure bills before Congress. The Republicans should just be irrelevant to this process because they oppose any spending on climate or any social spending. They're not even a conservative party anymore. They're an extremist party of racism and authoritarianism that believes they should rule as a minority in our society, even though they're losing elections. Yet Biden and the conservative Democrats in Congress want to negotiate with these fascists. So they've negotiated a bipartisan infrastructure bill that is pro-fossil fuels and thus pro-climate destruction. Meanwhile, the Democrats are negotiating with themselves on the Build Back Better reconciliation bill. And the conservative Democrats are winning those negotiations with the progressive Democrats. All year, the progressives have been repeatedly accepting cuts to the proposed social and climate programs, those that are still left in a bill that keeps shrinking. And it's just pathetic that Biden and the conservative Democrats insist on negotiating with the Republicans about all this when the Republicans voted against the certification of Biden in Congress. They continue to promote the big lie that Trump really won the election, and they're supporting new election laws in the states that entrench their minority rule through partisan gerrymandering, voter suppression, enabling violent suppression of election administrators, and even putting their own people in place so they can declare Republicans won elections that they actually lost. And the Democrats can't lift a finger to get rid of the filibuster, to get their voting rights and election protection bills passed, so they can federally preempt what the Republicans are doing in the states. These feckless Democrats don't seem to want to fight or don't know how to fight these ruthless Republicans. So instead, Biden's negotiating with the fascists instead of building a movement. And I can't expect the Democrats to do this, to isolate and defeat the fascists politically once and for all. So we got this bipartisan infrastructure bill. It adds $25 billion to the $15 billion the government already subsidizes the fossil fuel industry with. This is for carbon capture and sequestration from burning gas and coal, for hydrogen stripped from natural gas that releases the methane's carbon, and for so-called low emission buses powered by the fossil fuel natural gas. It also has in there a provision to exempt oil and gas pipelines from environmental impact statements and review. So some of the ways we've been fighting Keystone and Dakota Access and Enbridge Line 3 and Enbridge Line 5 involve those environmental impact statements. So they just want to get rid of them when it comes to oil and gas pipelines. Meanwhile, Biden just opened up 82 million acres in the Gulf of Mexico to new oil and gas drilling. And in the case of Enbridge, which Tom Goldtooth mentioned, Enbridge Line 3, he could have pulled the permits and stopped that. Instead, he went to court to defend that thing. And now it's operating, and it has the capacity to bring dirty tar sands oil from Alberta equal to the carbon emissions of 50 new coal plants. So we have to face the fact that Biden and the conservative Democrats are enemies of the climate, like the Republicans are. That's the reality we're facing. And we have to also face the fact that the progressive Democrats aren't helping too much. First, as Greens know, they took our signature issue from the 2010s, the Green New Deal, and watered it down radically. The non-binding resolution that AOC and Markey introduced into Congress eliminated the Greens' ban on fracking and new fossil fuel infrastructure, eliminated the Greens' rapid phase out of nuclear power, eliminated the Greens' deep cuts in military spending to help pay for a global Green New Deal. They changed the Greens' goal of zero emissions by 2030 to net zero by 2050, which means continued fossil fuel emissions with phony solutions like carbon offsets and carbon capture and storage. And of course, they extended our zero emissions deadline of 2030 to what they call net zero at 2050. And then in the presidential campaign, Biden and Harris ran against the Green New Deal openly. So last March, Biden comes forth with a 8-year, $2.2 trillion American jobs plan, but only $800 billion of that was for climate programs. That's $100 billion a year. Compare that to serious Green New Deal proposals. Our eco-socialist Green New Deal proposal we got a budget of $27.5 trillion, and that's from doing real calculations over 10 years. It's about 35 times more than Biden proposed. Bernie Sanders' Green New Deal was $16.3 trillion over 10 years, about 20 times more than Biden. And in response to Biden, the progressive Democrats got behind the Green New Deal Network's Thrive agenda, which is a 10-year, $10 trillion budget, or about 12 times more than Biden. But what happened? That was last spring. So Biden, with the American Families Plan, the social infrastructure, he was proposing 6.1 trillion. So the progressives said, okay, we'll go with 6.1 instead of 10. And then they went into the budget blueprint negotiations this summer and started at 6.1. And by the end of the summer, they're all voting for 3.5 trillion. And then last week, Biden said, no, you got to come down to around 2 trillion. And the progressives said, okay, we got to come down. So, I'm not sure they're helping us that much. We don't know what climate programs are going to survive in the Build Back Better infrastructure bill. But we know because of what was originally proposed, they got to be inadequate because they're not adding to the funding. And then I don't have time to go into all the problems with what Biden proposed, which means for us as Greens, we got to keep demanding the full eco-socialist Green New Deal in the streets and in the elections. And I mean now, we can't wait for these Democrats to get out of their own way in Congress. It requires an eco-socialist approach, primarily through the public sector with public enterprise and planning, as opposed to the subsidies and tax breaks and other market incentives for private enterprise that are in the bipartisan and reconciliation bills. We need to do what the federal government did during the World War II emergency, when the federal government took over a quarter of the manufacturing capacity of this country in order to turn industry on a dime into the arsenal of democracy to arm allies to defeat the fascists. We need to do nothing less through the public sector now to defeat climate change. And I would add to defeat the domestic fascists in the Republican Party today. We got a better program, it's more popular, and we got to put that out there. So that's the only way we're going to do the rapid transition. Government needs to directly hire the workers and make the products we need to carry out this emergency program. For example, there's a lot of talk about a civilian climate corps. The Democrats want to run it through AmeriCorps, grants to nonprofits and for-profits. We need that to be a public enterprise where there are actual public jobs doing, and people getting into public enterprises to produce the things we need. We need to bring the utilities and the giant energy corporations into a public energy system, not give them tax breaks and subsidies, as the Democrats propose to do with the clean energy. They keep changing the name. It was called a payments program. Now they call it some other P program, but they're paying the utilities. We need a public railway system and so forth. And let's be clear, we're in an existential emergency. We know from the leaked International Panel on Climate Change's 6th assessment report that all coal and gas power plants have to be shut down within 10 years if we're gonna stay below the crucial threshold of 1.5 degrees of global warming. Beyond that threshold lies runaway global warming and human extinction, according to the 6th assessment report. The IPCC's report also says that to have just a 50% chance of staying below 1.5 degrees, the remaining carbon budget for the world is only 500 gigatons carbon. And we will blast through that in 11 years at the current rate of emissions. So what is on the table before Congress doesn't come close to that? It's not going to be discussed in Glasgow at the COP26. I mean, we need to keep pushing this Green New Deal as, you know, and it's an emergency and we need this kind of emergency program. And the Economic Bill of Rights needs to be a part of it. It's crucial to the politics of winning the Green New Deal because the Economic Bill of Rights will end poverty and economic insecurity by guaranteeing the rights to a living wage job, an income above poverty, affordable housing, quality health care, lifelong public education from childcare and pre-K through college, and a secure retirement through increased Social Security